14, 2018. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Here.
Ms. Irvine.
Here.
Ms. Alvarez will not be here today. Mr. Patterson.
Here.
Mr. Silva.
Here.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Chairman Peterson.
Here.
The motion is approved with, I'm sorry, we have a quorum with 6 members of the board here.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is a report from the chairman of the Citizen Advisory Committee, Chairman Barkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With me today is Vanessa Hall, the Vice Chair of the CAB. Chairman Peterson, board members, President Carter, and staff, I wish to make a brief presentation on the activities of the Citizens Advisory Board. As you know, our board was reconstituted this year according to state statutes. We are required to meet quarterly and just finished our final meeting a few minutes ago. We spent the first year being briefed on important authority subjects such as financing, operations, personnel, cleanliness programs, and safety and security programs. We also made a site visit to the control center. Our plans in 2019 is to continue to engage with staff and to bring forward our concerns to the board, to management, and to staff regarding critical transit issues that affect our riders and our citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board, and we look forward to working with you in the coming year.
Well, first of all, let me just thank you and Vanessa for taking time out of your busy schedule to come down. I mean, we really do appreciate on behalf of the board. One, I mentioned that this is a Citizens Advisory Board, and this is something that I know the board takes very seriously. We look forward to working with you in 2019. We look forward to your recommendations to come to the board as well as to the president of CTA. So again, thank you for your volunteer work on behalf of the citizens of this city who take public transit, and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
What I'd like to do now, with the board's permission, I would like to, I'm going to go out in a minute. Yes. I would like to address public comment before we recess for the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee meeting. Greg?
Yes, sir. We have one
speaker.
public comment speaker today, Mr. David Dalka. If you'd like to step up and address the board, David? And please try to keep your remarks to about 3 or 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Sure. Good afternoon. I would have been here last week, except the Belmont L station somehow didn't get any budget notices on there. So if you could put a note for next year to make sure that the Belmont L stop at Red Line has plenty of notices of that meeting. I'm sure you get a lot more representation of my community at that meeting.
Okay.
Just briefly, while we're talking about the Belmont L stop, there is a severe bird problem that exists if you enter on the north side and come up that stairway. There is a constant pigeon problem in that spot there. I would love to see that addressed. I was at an event last Friday night where I took the Red Line home from Jackson after midnight to Belmont. I didn't feel safe. There was a lot of homeless people on the train. There was a lot of people that were drunk on the train. I don't normally ride the train at that time of night, so it was kind of shocking to me compared to my normal daytime experience, and that was there. Yesterday, I took a ride from the Logan Square station to Rosemont during rush hour to go to a business event. I unceremoniously learned that they're turning the trains around at Jefferson Park during rush hour. So they're kicking everybody off the train when it's 20 degrees outside, to have them stand out there in the cold, to then have them wait for the next train that comes by to do that. I witnessed several people with suitcases going to the airport that were upset. I witnessed other people that were grumbling about it. It's only 3 more stops to the end. I understand you have a capacity problem on the Blue Line and want to make those things happen, but I don't think that's the right way to do it. And I'd like to ask you to consider talking to the Blue Line manager about, seeing if we get more trains put there instead of turning these around there because that wasn't a good experience.
And you said that's at Jefferson?
Jefferson Park, yeah, going towards O'Hare. So just imagine yourself on that train with a suitcase going towards O'Hare and being kicked off when you're in that kind of time bind. That wouldn't be a good user experience, and that could get around the world. Recently at Newport and Clark, I will just briefly say there's been a disastrous transportation change in the streets at that location that have impinged the ability for CTA buses to be in the right-hand shoulder and not impinge the road traffic along with the Newport side. Greg witnessed this with me, and he can give you more details about it at a later time. But there was no community notice given about this. There was no community input. I would like to think the CTA would have an interest in, inputting into traffic things that prevent such behavior that makes travel time slower for everybody. That's not good user experience for your riders. It's not good for the productivity of this great city. Lastly, today I just wanted to bring to your attention, as you know, on August 8th, my internet was disconnected as a part of the RPM project utility moves. It was out for about 72 hours, or it wasn't working properly. It's still not working fully properly. I'm supposed to be switched over to the new source that they're putting underground, and that was supposed to happen weeks ago. I'm not getting any information from RCN or the CTA or ComEd or anybody about when this is going to occur. Meanwhile, every time it rains, my internet doesn't work. This project is not being managed effectively, is the most polite way I could say it. And I'd like to see that change before we enter the more invasive phases that will take place. In addition, I also communicated to Greg to share with the board, and I know he shared it with you. Cook County Hospital put in they did some construction of a new wing there, and they used their new green construction law, which requires that all the diesel equipment on site meets certain frequent current standards, not old 1960s trucks that spew stuff that would make it impossible for somebody to spend time in their house. That's Chapter 30, Article 9, Green Construction, Sections 3950 through 3955. My understanding is that Greg's forwarded that to your law department, but I have not heard back about that. My concern in raising that, sir, is I hope that can be, whether you have to by law or whether you just do it because it's the right thing for the communities that you're interfacing with. I would like to hope that you could, use that for the people that you bid the contracts out to for the RPM project, so when they do work in our neighborhood for 5 years, it's a pleasant experience rather than one that kills people's lungs and irritates their eyes and makes it.
We need to wrap up shortly, David.
Huh?
We need to wrap up shortly. We're at a time limit.
And just in general, I hope that the RPM project works more smoothly and that we make those things happen. And I thank you for your time, and I would welcome talking to you further at some other point in time.
Okay, well, I appreciate you again coming down. What I'll have Greg do is coordinate with the appropriate CTA staff regarding some of the issues that you've brought to our attention today. And so I know Greg has been talking with you off and on. It's been the point person, so he will work with the appropriate CTA staff to respond to the issues that you've shared with the board this afternoon.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You have a great day, sir.
All right, you as well.
Thank you, David. And that concludes the public comment section of the board meeting. I just want to state for the record that all public comment speakers have to contact me by 24 hours in advance of the meeting, or else we don't do it. And that's listed on our website and in other materials. Thank you. Okay. That's the end of the public comment section, sir.
All right, thanks, Greg. I will now entertain a motion to recess in order for the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee to meet.
So move. Second.
Recess of the board meeting. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Irvine.
Yes.
Reverend Patterson.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion passes with 6 yes votes. We're recessed.
All right.
So now we're going to go then to
Finance, Audit, and Budget.
Ready, Capitals? I'm sorry. That was the end of the board. It's a weird day. It's the end of the board meeting. So now we're going to go into the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. Then we're going to come back to the board meeting. Okay? Ready? Okay. Alex, we are ready.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
afternoon.
I would like to call to order the November 14, 2018 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Reverend Miller.
Here.
Mr. Irvine.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Reverend Patterson.
Here.
That's what's confusing me. Chairman Silva.
Here.
The committee has a quorum with 6 members present.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of October 10th, 2018. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Will the Secretary call the roll, please?
Yes. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Reverend Patterson.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
Our next order of business is the review of the finance report. Presenter Jeremy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeremy Fine, your CFO, and I'll be going through the September results. With regard to our revenues, we continue to see progress on Farebox and Pass totals. We see, again, Farebox down slightly, but more than offset by the Pass increases, particularly on the 7 and 30-day passes. So we see a net total there of $500,000 for the month of September. Reduced fare subsidy is down 1.2, which we've seen over the course of the year due to the haircut from the state cutting that reduced fare subsidy by half. Non-farebox totals are down about $300,000 to budget, but up over $500,000 on a variance to September of 2017 basis. Overall, that leaves us for the month of September revenue total at $1 million off of where we assumed per the budget. So we've been able over the past several months to continue to see progress on closing that gap on a month-to-month basis. We see that we're up almost $3 million on a variance to September 2017 basis, but again, trying to continue to narrow that gap on the revenues. We see the average fare down a couple of pennies, but up versus where we were last year, and then free rides about 300,000 less, for continued efforts on scofflaws against the month of September of 2017. On a year-to-date basis, we see some similar trajectory on each of the lines. So farebox totals down about $4 million, but more than offset by the $6.6 million from passes. Again, the 7 and 30-day has done the bulk of that, but through those summer months, we also benefited from 1-day and 3-day pass increases. So we saw on a net basis $2.5 million positive from fare and pass totals on a variance to budget basis. Reduced fare subsidy down almost 11, again due to the haircuts from the state. And then non-fare box, we see 2.4 down. That has been impacted by the federal sequestration of some of our BAB subsidy, as well as some timing issues on the advertising side and some additional purchases of panels and whatnot for advertising display that will more than make up for itself in the future. So total revenues are down to budget about $11 million, but up almost 30 versus last year. So again, this is what we would have expected, but again, the outperformance or slight outperformance of fare and pass totals continues to do better than where we assumed when we were talking about the fare increase this time last year. It's performed as expected, if not slightly better. On the expense side, we continue.
Jeremy,
Yes.
before you leave that page, so if I look at where we're down by the reduced fare subsidy
Yes.
and total revenue, so really if the state money was coming in, we would be off budget by about $100,000.
Correct. So it's really an important point, and one that we'll talk about more extensively in the 2019 budget proposal. But Chairman, you're exactly correct that if we were to have received the state subsidy and then on top of that, the subsidy that we get from the federal government and for the Build America Bond program, we would actually be not only flat but slightly positive, for the year on our revenues. So It's very critical for us to receive all of the, basically reinstate the revenues that we've historically gotten from the state. So, we need to get those, the reduced fare reimbursement dollars, and then we'll talk about, like I said, in the 2019 budget proposal, the capital dollars that we've not received from the state as well, which totals about 200 to 250 million a year. So, very critical for us to have the reinstatement of those funds that we have historically received from the state.
And what are our expectations, okay, with the new governor?
So I don't want
And
to
the
project
haircuts.
anything, but, again, I think that it does present an opportunity for us to continue to make the plea with regard to the need for the operating and capital revenues.
Mr. Chairman, we are certainly having those conversations with the governor's team as they begin the transition process and making them very much aware of the financial challenges that we have faced at the state, both with our operating budget as well as our capital budget. And we're certainly, optimistic that there will be opportunities to look at this as the new administration comes on board.
So Jeremy, the non-fare box, a lot of that, some of that has to do with the timing for the advertisement and stuff. Am I reading that correctly, or?
Some of it does. Some of it has to do with the Build America bond, subsidy that we typically receive from the federal government. We received a haircut this year on that. And then, we've seen some slight downward trend on, some of the other lines embedded in there. We have concessions and whatnot. But again, overall, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth, from our continued efforts on the advertising side, because you see overall we're up about $10 million vis-a-vis where we were last year. We were, like to kind of set the bar high, right? So when we're setting the budget, we want to make sure that we're striving, we have a goal to strive for. And, I think that we'll continue to do that, but, we didn't quite hit the striving mark, but we're well in excess of where we were last year. So again, we've seen tremendous progress on the lines, on the individual lines, for continued growth in our advertising dollars, our concession dollars, and the other non-fare box revenues. But again, those federal subsidy cuts, as well as some additional purchases that we've made on the platform panels and whatnot, do offset some of those revenues in the short term, but we more than make up for that in the long term as the advertising has a bigger platform to sell.
So Jeremy, one of the things that I think, so how much of the 2.4 million shortfall in the non-fare box would you attribute to the Build America bond?
So the Build America bond program was probably about 400,000 or 500,000 of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest is basically spreads, for where we projected on the budget versus actual.
So you wouldn't have the information today, but if you could at our December meeting. So the continuing resolution to fund the federal government runs to December the 7th. They've already passed 5 of the 12 appropriation bills.
Mm-hmm.
They've got 7 sitting in the queue. Mm-hmm. They either will have to do another continuing resolution, or in the lame duck session, which exists today, mm-hmm. they will have to pass a budget before the House changes over. You've got a divided Congress. Do we know in the existing appropriation bills that are sitting in the queue today that the Houses, the Senate has yet to vote on, was that money restored for FY19? And again, our board meeting in December will be after December 7th. So again, you can come back and brief it, but I was just curious because they passed 5 appropriation bills, but it wasn't one, the transportation bill was not one of them. So that's why I'm curious to see if, was it put forth in the budget that's sitting in the queue for FY19, the funds that we ended up losing?
So we'll confirm that. Unfortunately, this extension this year was put in late in the process, so we'll be keeping an eye on that process as well to make sure that any amendments to any of those bills don't extend that Build America bond haircut that it did this year. So we'll circle back in the December meeting.
And let us know in December if some amendment was put in to extend it or not. Okay.
Correct. with regard to our expenses, for September, we see that labor coming in slightly unfavorable, but if you would offset the impact of the ATU contract increases, we would be essentially flat, if not slightly higher, slightly favorable for that particular line item. Material, fuel continue to be slightly favorable by about $500,000 each. Power is essentially flat but slightly down, as is security services. But again, the star performer that is here in September, as has been throughout the last several months, if not longer, has been our expenditure control on other expenses. So those are our contractual expenses that we continue to keep a keen eye on. That allows us to have a favorability for the month of September of little shy of $3 million, $2.8 million. So that allows us to offset the million drag that we saw on revenue. So on a net basis for the month of September, we're favorable to the tune of $1.8 million. This is a somewhat similar total to what we saw for August, and knock on wood, one that we hope to continue in the last quarter of the year. And that allows us to date to close the gap that we have seen through most of the year. Again, the line items here are somewhat similar to what we discussed on the prior page, with labor being unfavorable on a year-to-date basis. But again, if you were to offset the impact of the ATU contract, it would be essentially flat. Material, fuel, power, all positive, as is security services and other expenses. That leaves us on a net basis up $10.5 million on a year-to-date basis. And again, if you net that against the 10.8 drag on revenues, we're essentially flat, down about $238,000, but essentially flat. So we've been able to close that gap with continued efforts on belt tightening through the last several months. So we'll continue to see that trend continue on through the rest of the year.
So question, you're at November 14th. What are October numbers looking like?
So it's still a little early to tell, but again, we think that the trend that we've seen both in August and September does seem to be holding form for October. As we've talked about in prior months, this is kind of the best ridership time because you have kids coming back online for school, as well as people going back off of summer vacations back into the workplace on a regular basis. So, we do see, better ridership numbers. So again, those fare and pass totals should continue. That offsets the drag that we see on the revenue side. And again, we've had tremendous support from the various departments to ensure that we continue to see cost control here, because that's been, our bread and butter for the last couple of years, frankly, on being able to offset any drags that we're seeing on revenue. So we'll continue those efforts, but again, being able to close that gap on revenues is exciting to continue to see progress and hopefully getting back to a place where we would see positive budget variance.
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest, and we've been very fortunate and blessed these last few years, it looks like winter is setting in a lot earlier. So when you start to talk about, fuel, knock on wood, I don't even want to talk up snow.
I think it's coming. So.
Yeah, but again, it looks like this winter, unlike the past 3 to 4 years, we could have more of a challenging winter this year.
Yeah, so we do try to buffer against that to some degree. We take a longer-term average with regard to winter expenses, so we don't extrapolate off of like the prior winter or prior couple of winters. Because of the fact that, you do have some cyclicality in the weather, so that you see, last couple of years where we've benefited from low snowfalls. So we do have a little bit of, buffer in there when we do budget by taking a longer term look at, those snow removal costs. But yes, you're exactly right. Any type of additional, benefit that we would see on revenues, are much welcome to help offset any type of increased costs on snow removal. Okay. The last page is an overview of the three commodities that we purchase, fuel, power, and natural gas. We have been making selective purchases here on the fuel side. You've seen over the past several weeks at the pump even, fuel prices relaxing a little bit as, kind of the market consternation over the sanctions on Iran haven't kind of rocked the market as much as they had originally anticipated. So, we continue to make selective purchases there for 2020 on the fuel side. Power and natural gas, we continue to be locked in at the full block for 2019 for power. And for natural gas, we're locked in for the full block for 70%, which is our cap for natural gas for 2019. We'll look to make additional purchases for 2020 and 2021 for natural gas, but right now, as we enter into the winter market, there is a bit of a spike in natural gas prices, as you would expect. So it's probably more advantageous for us to wait until the springtime when natural gas usage starts to dip.
You might want to share with the board the conversation we had.
Okay.
I want to say on Tuesday or Wednesday, some of the favorable responses that you got back from the RFP.
So we're very excited. As we've talked about in prior months, we went back out for an RFP process for power because we were not happy with the sharpness of the pencil, so to speak, the aggressiveness of the bids. From our prior provider, Dynegy. We went back out. I think that the message was well received from the marketplace at large, but particularly from Dynegy. We received 5 bids, which was more aggressive and more bidders than we've seen previously. Typically, we see about 3 bids, so we saw a much bigger pool, which was good. And I think that as I indicated previously, Dynegy received the message. They sharpened their pencil considerably, and we were able to get a nice quality bid from them for the traction power component. We also received another bid that was more aggressive on the non-traction side of the house from a firm called MP2. MP2 is an affiliate of Shell Energy, and they're a new provider to the CTA. So we're very excited to have both firms come in as providers for our power, and we were able to get fixed rate pricing from them that was very advantageous for us. So we're very excited about that, and it's a good way to test the market with MP2 as a future provider, as not only a current provider but a future provider as well. So based on the RFP, we're able to bifurcate those 2 pieces and select the best bid. So we saw, the Dynegy bid come in very aggressive on the BAFO stage, the best and final offer stage, much more aggressive than what we had seen at the prior stage. And by bifurcating them, we were also able to save an additional $1 million by having, the 2 providers. So again, very exciting on that front. They're also both able to provide a coal-free option. So we will not be receiving coal-fired energy from either provider. So, again, just trying to make our way through with green energy initiatives here at CTA.
We wouldn't want to go on out to 20 or 21. That's why we had them.
Yes. So for exactly right. So the new providers, both Dynegy and MP2. We will be going out for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So, again, picking up 3 years initially, and then we have 2 one-year options that we can extend with. But again, we'll be testing the market, and at the end of the 3-year window, if we don't feel that we're getting aggressive bids, we can always put it back out for rebid from either those firms or other firms as well. So again, I think this was very advantageous for the CTA, saved us several $1 million by going back out for bid, and then an additional $1 million by bifurcating the 2 tranches so that we have 2 different providers now.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance amending Ordinance 017-124, approving the fiscal year 2018-2022 capital improvement program. Jeremy?
So I'm joined by Michelle Curran, the Vice President of Budget and Capital Finance, and she'll walk through the 2018 CIP closing amendment.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Board. I'm Michelle Curran, Vice President of Budget and Capital Finance. We are proposing to amend the 2018 to 2022 Capital Improvement Program to provide $13.1 million of additional competitively awarded federal grant funds, which will be dedicated to the purchase of electric buses and security projects. The amendment also distributes bond funds across multiple years of the CIP to better reflect the timing of the funding needed for the Red Purple Modernization Project and for projects supported by the city's ground transportation tax revenues. The line of credit authorized earlier this year allows us to be more flexible with the timing of our bond issuances, which will reduce our interest expense. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Great job, 13 million.
Thank you.
Very excited about winning those competitive grants.
If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Our next order of business is the review of two ordinances, an ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2019 and financial plan for calendar years 2020-2021. An ordinance approving the fiscal years 2019-2023 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and execution of grant and cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. Jeremy.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your CFO. We're pleased to present for your consideration an ordinance adopting the 2019 operating budget. The proposed operating budget was released publicly on October 18th. In accordance with our statutory requirements, a public hearing was held on November 7th. And the 2019 budget proposal is a balanced budget that totals $1.55 billion. It does not include a fare increase or service cuts. However, the state has impacted both our operating and the capital budgets, as I previously mentioned. For example, the state budget cuts are estimated at $15 million for the 2019 budget due to a 1.5% surcharge on our sales tax receipts and a 5% reduction to the public transportation funds, known as the PTF funds, through the first half of 2019 calendar year. The budget does assume that the 2019 PTF and reduced fare reimbursement funding is restored through the state fiscal year 2020 budget. And this is as per RTA marks that are set by the RTA.
And that will start when?
So that would start, we are assuming per our budget that those will resume, receipt from the state for the second half of our calendar year in our budget. It's also should be noted that the CTA provides approximately $100 million of free and reduced fare rides annually. So again, we typically have received support for $28 million, and that has been cut in half since 2015 to $14 million. So at best, we've only received $28 million out of the 100. And again, that's why it's so critical for us just to get back to the level playing field that we were receiving prior 2015. There's also been no state capital bill since 2009, which has an impact on us of over $200 million a year. Typically, we receive about $200 to $250 million a year in capital funding from the state. That has not been received since 2014. That 2009 program expired in 2014, so we've not received capital funding from them since that time. The next slide here highlights the efforts. Yes.
Before you move, not having a capital calculated how that impacts federal money because we don't have the matching funds locally?
So what we've had to do is we've had to issue bonds on our own behalf based on our sales tax credit. Those bonds and the debt service related is a haircut essentially on our operating funds. That's been about $50 million of debt service related to the $900 million of bonds that we've had to issue because we've not received state funding. As the chairman indicates, we have to be able to provide local matching dollars to unlock the federal dollars that we receive. So if we don't receive it from the state, which we have not, we had to come up with our own means. And again, we've had to issue those bonds on our own dime. And again, that's a $50 million annual impact to our operating budget because we did not receive the state funding. And to offset that, we've had to tighten our own belt because of the lack of the operating dollars as well as the impact of the additional capital debt service. We've had to tighten our belt through a number of different measures, both on cost savings as well as new non-fare box revenues that we talked about in the FAB report of driving additional advertising dollars, concession dollars, and whatnot. But the main line items this year that we're talking about with regard to the budget includes the cutting of $18 million in labor costs, which is freezing 150 positions. Those are non-safety related positions, but again, we appreciate the assistance of the various departments on ensuring that we can continue to rein in our labor costs as we move forward. We are also able to lock in fuel and power cost savings that provides budget certainty as well as a $3.3 million positive impact to our 2019 budget. And then again, those contractual expenses, I think that we've crossed that hurdle with the departments, and they've been very, understanding that just because they have a contractual line item, you don't have to go up to that full contract amount. They've been much more efficient on how they use their contracts so that we can continue to hold the line, if not outperform on those expenses. Since 2011, we've been able to realize $330 million of cost savings in additional non-fare box revenues. To put that into context of our budget's $1.55 billion, so almost 20% since 2011 has either been cut out or added to, cut out of expenses or added to revenues since 2011. Over 150 million of that has come during President Carter's tenure. So, as you go on, I think we've done a great job of continuing to be effective on controlling costs and driving new revenues because you typically would think a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked. We've done a good job of continuing to harvest what is left on the tree, but we are really kind of running out of options here unless we continue to get the state funding on the operating side and on the state side. So we've pulled a lot of rabbits out of the hat, as President Carter likes to say, but we're really kind of running out of rabbits here. So it's very critical for us to continue to receive those state funding dollars either on the operating side or on the capital side.
I had a visual of a fall autumn tree where the leaves are falling.
Sorry, I was throwing a lot of analogies there. So, with regard to the operating budget expenses, we see those continuing to go up, because of the labor cost increases. Unlike this year, where we've reported a negative variance on a month-to-month basis, these expenses will be loaded into the budget, so you'll be more able to see kind of variances off of the actual budgeted amounts, as opposed to having to do the true-up as I talked through on a monthly FAB basis. Fuel costs have increased over 2018 record low levels, but again, we're still in kind of a very low realm with regard to overall gas prices historically at the CTA. But those do increase for the 2019 budget. And then finally is just a recap of that debt service cost that continues to grow because of the lack of the state capital bill. $50 million is a big dollar amount to continue to wrestle with on an ongoing basis because of this lack of the state funding over the last 5 years. So again, that's why it's so critical for us to staunch the bleeding, to get the funding back, both on the operating side and on the capital side. With regard to revenues, we continue to see positive momentum on our fare and pass revenues. We assume that those will continue to grow based on current trends that we've seen through 2018, and also because of the benefit of the full year of the UPass increase coming into effect. The public funding growth will continue to be positive, and that is projected by the RTA for all 3 service boards. And again, it assumes that we also have restoration of the state funding for PTF at the half-year point, as well as the reduced fare reimbursement. So those are 2 critical components that we need to see come back online. Any questions with regard to the operating budget?
Any questions? We just have to get the money from the government, from the governor.
I was going to say, you really need the state to step up. $50 million a year of debt service on $900 million worth of debt over 30 years. And I'm assuming most of this debt is spread out over 30 years.
That's correct.
That's a lot of money.
That is correct. And
that's a lot of money.
Yes.
For a long period of time.
Right? And I mean, it just stifles your ability to continue to invest in infrastructure, the things that we need to invest in. So
yeah, would prefer not to pay bond investors interest and instead plow it back into capital projects.
And this was during a time where interest rates were low and you were able to go out. And just think about the debt now, where you've got 30-year just real estate, 30-year mortgages are at 5%, and you were borrowing this money probably at 2 or 3%.
Yeah, it was a little higher than that just because of spreads in the larger Illinois market. So we were sub 5, but because of the duration, we were in the 4 plus range. Interest rates continue to creep up, and again, just another reason why we need to get the funding back from the state so that we don't have to continue that trend.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 2 items on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
And I have one more component.
I'm sorry.
With regard to the capital budget.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's really quick.
Yes. Yeah.
That's fine.
Apologize.
In addition to the money.
In addition to the 2019 operating budget, we're also presenting the 5-year capital improvement program, which is the 2019 through 2023 program that represents a $2.9 billion of investment that continues over $8 billion of capital investment that has been initiated since 2011. So this has been a tremendous amount of capital investment in the system. We'd like to continue that, but again, state funding is required. The 2019 capital budget proposal continues to modernize infrastructure, enhance safety and security, and improve the customer experience. The CTA has a diverse source of federal and local funds for its capital plan, but the plan does not include state funding since no program has been approved since 2009. As previously mentioned, this also has an impact of over $200 million a year and has required the CTA to issue its own bonds in order to receive those federal matching funds. 2019 through 2023 CIP includes transformative projects such as the RPM project, Your New Blue, and Red Line Extension. It includes rehabbing and developing gateway stations as well as modernizing our bus and rail fleets. It also continues the safe and secure and fast track programs that are funded through the ride-hailing fee projects, and as well as funding our state of good repair projects. So again, we appreciate the support for public transportation and glad to answer any questions with regard to the 2019 capital program.
Any questions?
No, it's just got me focused on numbers. $2 billion of this is the red line, the red purple modernization project of the 2.9.
So a portion of the red purple modernization was funded through the prior CIP programs. Okay. So again, this is kind of split out among various projects. Some portion of it is for RPM, but again, the bulk of the RPM project funding came through because we received the FFGA through prior CIP programs.
Any questions? There are no further questions. May I have leave to place these two items on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could just say one thing. Obviously, Jeremy and his team did a tremendous job putting together the budget for this year, and I can tell you it's no easy task to provide a balanced budget that basically provides for no fare increase or service cuts, particularly given the fiscal environment that we're operating in. So I just want to take a moment to thank Jeremy and my entire management team. They put up on their slide that there's been over $150 million worth of savings under my tenure, but the truth of the matter is it's not me who's doing that. It's the entire management team that's finding cost savings and really driving the benefits that we're seeing out of our budget. And I just wanted to take a moment to let you know how much I personally appreciate the work that they're doing and the work that went into this budget so that we could present it to you today.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
John.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Chip Bob Inc. for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. Carol, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So this first real estate item is a recommendation to authorize an amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Ship Bob Inc. for 120 North Racine. As you know, the CTA owns the building at 120 North Racine, in which the CTA Control Center is located on the 3rd floor. The first and second floors, formerly occupied by the city, are leased to Sterling Racine LLC. The board had previously authorized a sublease between Sterling Racine and Ship Bob Inc., which is a logistics company, for just over 20,000 square feet. Ship Bob uses this space for its corporate headquarters. Ship Bob is expanding and would like to sublease an additional 10,000 square feet. This lease amendment requires the consent of the Chicago Transit Board, which cannot be unreasonably withheld. The terms of the lease between Sterling Racine and CTA remain unchanged, and Sterling Racine remains responsible for the payment of all rent and operating expenses under the lease. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Excuse me. It's Carol Morey, Chief Infrastructure Officer.
M-O-R-E-Y.
Any questions? There are no further questions. May I have leave to place this item on the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing a lease of retail concession space located at 15 West 95th Street, Chicago, Illinois. Carol?
So the second item is a concessions lease at the South Terminal for the new 95th Street station. The ordinance would authorize the lease of 357 square feet of space to Greyhound Lines, Inc. Greyhound was the sole bidder for the space, but bidding was limited to companies providing intercity bus transportation services, as the community has indicated that preserving the service from the station is very important to them. Greyhound will pay an initial annual rent of $40 per square foot with a 3% annual escalation, and that's an increase of 11% over the previous rent paid by Greyhound. The lease is for 10 years with 2 5-year options, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Greyhound has been out there how long?
Like 20, 30 years, a long time.
That's what I was gonna say for as long as I can recall. Prior to this space here, what were they using prior to us building?
They did have a space in the North Terminal that they
had
were
space in
leasing.
the north. Okay.
And currently, they've relocated to the street, but they're looking forward to resuming operations out of the terminal.
Any questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus?
Thank you.
So moved.
Thank you, Carol. Our final order of business today is the review of 10 purchase and sales award recommendations. Helen McCormick. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We will start with contract numbers A1 through A3. Any questions?
Staff, please introduce yourselves.
Ellen McCormick, Vice President of Purchasing and Supply Chain.
Juan Pablo Prieto, Senior Manager, Diversity Programs.
So I've got a question on A2. The contract you're bringing before the board is 200,000 less.
I'm sorry.
I said, yeah, so my question is regarding contract item or board resolution item number A2. And I wanted to just get an understanding from staff. It looks like the new contract is $200,000 less than the previous contract. This is for $1 million. The last contract was $1.2 million.
I see that. We get those numbers from the using department.
Okay.
It depends on how much they think they're going to use a month.
Good afternoon. Tom Dietrich, your bus mechanical officer. The contract has been reduced by that amount because we've actually seen usage on those rebuilt transmissions significantly reduced over the last couple of years. So there was no need to go with the existing amount.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the savings. I was just wondering what that led to. So that's great. Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Kevin.
I have a question about A4. Just curious to find out the status of the new rail cars, where they are in the process.
Daniel Tinsley, your rail mechanical officer. Could you please repeat your question?
Sure. I'm just curious about the status of new rail cars. It says you have a change order on that order for the new rail cars as well.
Currently, from our previous change order, the rail cars are still on schedule from the extension that was granted under change order 1.
To maybe put a finer point on it, we're expecting to receive delivery of the car shells early next year. That would be news. Early next year is at the facility on the far south side in the Pullman district, and then we should be receiving delivery of the actual rail cars late at like the end of that year,
End of
right?
December? Yeah.
Right, December of 2019. So we're still on track based on our contractual schedule to receive the rail cars.
Any other questions from the A1 to the A3? We did A4 anyway.
Just on A5, when,
Okay,
when did we
let's
take delivery
move.
of the last 5,000 series cars? When did we take delivery of the last 5,000 series?
That was in 2015.
Excuse me, that's Chris Haggerty. What's your title, Chris?
General Manager, Rail Engineering.
Got your answer, Kevin?
I got my answer. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're gonna move to A6. Any questions for A6?
So we had no DBE responded to that request?
We did not have any DBs that bid on the contract, no. There's a very limited number of firms that already make the seat inserts. Unfortunately, there were no DBs that could provide the seat inserts.
I will point out that Friedman Seating is a local company, so that will be a local benefit to this particular contract.
I think it's on the west side, 37th Ward.
Yes.
We're gonna move to B1. Any questions for B1? This office furniture is for where? For
It's for 5, 6, 7, so all the furniture here, and then some out in the fields as well. So it's like the cubicles that we sit in, it's the chairs in our offices, it's the tables, the desks.
Good. And DBE, Juan Pablo?
Unfortunately, there's only 2 companies in Illinois that are licensed to install Knoll furniture, and neither of them are DBEs. We did reach out to Knoll to see if there was any way to get any DBEs as authorized installers, but have not heard back yet.
So let's move to contract E1. Any questions?
No question on E1. So we went from, we've been using about 1.2 million messages per year, and then in 2016, that went up to 2.4 million, and 2017, 5.2 million. To what do you attribute the increase in messaging?
Directors, good afternoon. Brian Steele, Vice President, Marketing and Communications. That's a great question, Director Ryan. Really, it's been the popularity of our subscriptions. As you're probably aware, we make available email and text messages subscriptions by line and by route. So customers can choose from one line, multiple lines, multiple bus routes. We've seen a pretty big percentage increase in the number of subscribers. We're currently just under 70,000 individual subscribers, and a lot of those subscribers subscribe to multiple alerts. We've seen a big jump also in the number of messages we've been putting out. In the last 365 days, we've put out almost 27 million individual messages related to both planned and unplanned service disruptions. So really it's the popularity of the service and also the fact that we've been doing a lot of planned construction work, which generates a lot of alerts and bulletins.
So the percentage of these messages that are going to subscriptions is that increasing significantly?
That's increasing. The number of subscribers, again, is up about 3% over the past year, and then the number of individual messages that we're sending those subscribers has also increased.
Communications good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move, any other questions? Let's move to F1.
So just a question on F1. So the value of the 3-year contract is 18 million, 6 million a year. Just curious, because in the write-up as I was reading it, what was the value of the previous contract under Sedgwick over the same period of time? I'm assuming that it was 3 years as well. So you've got 3 years with 2 funded 1-year options. So
I'm sorry, Chairman, it is 5 years actually, because it's 3 years, and 2 options, but the option years are funded. So
Okay.
the 18 million is for all 5 years.
it's over 5 years.
Yes.
What was the previous contract value?
It was just a little over 18 million.
So we actually have savings this, so there's a
Slight savings,
savings,
yes.
slight savings, okay. The other question regarding F1, the value of.
Excuse me, Chairman. I'm not, oh, thank you.
Just so you know, with
Excuse
F1.
me, please introduce yourself.
Tom McCone, Chief Administrative Officer. Contracts F1 and I1 are related. What we did is we took our previous contract, which had been with a vendor for almost 20 years, and we wanted a more competitive environment, so we split them apart. So when Ellen is referencing the prior contract, it's actually a larger contract to contain more services. When we looked at this component of the services that we bid, this was it was consistent with what those services within the prior contract. It was difficult to do an exact apples-to-apples comparison because we're comparing one part to a much larger part of it, but this was a competitive amount, slightly higher than the prior contract.
And it's new to CTA, really?
Yes, the company that is recommended is new to the CTA, but they're not new to the public sector. So they're one of the leading firms providing absence management services both in the public and the private sector.
And what was the commitment for DBE?
The commitment was 20%. They met the goal.
And they're new, so we really have to be tough.
Yeah, yes, we will have a conversation with them to let them know our expectations on DBE and compliance.
What's the dollar value of the DBE contract for this one?
I can get you the exact dollar amount. I believe on this one they committed to 20% because the The 18 million is a not to exceed amount. So depending
so
on
it's
the
20% of the 18 million over 5 years?
correct. If we exhausted the entire contract, yes.
Okay.
So it's 20% of the usage.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. Any other questions in F1? Let's move to I1. And what the relationship of Reed
With the recommendation in
Yeah.
I-1 with
Yeah.
Corvell. So they actually have a partnership that they've formed together to enable communications between the two of them so that they're seamless to the CTA management, so that Reed is the primary interface, and then that goes to the workers' compensation component, which is managed through Corvell. But they have a strategic partnership together so that we can utilize that partnership, and then it's seamless to the CTA.
and also is 20% their commitment?
Yes, they committed to 20% on a 20% goal.
I would also point out that they both have the same DBE for the two contracts. So the DBE itself overall is getting a significant percentage of work.
Very good. Any other questions?
No, they understand that they can't switch out to DBE without talking to you, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Any other questions? Since there is no further, if there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 10 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
Second.
May I have a second? Will the secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Excuse me. Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Reverend Patterson.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
We're adjourned. Give me 3 minutes, Terry. Okay? Excuse me, would everybody please sit down? And I forgot to say before, please silence your telephones. Thank you. Please, we're about to start.
I now entertain a motion to return to open session.
So move.
All right, so we're going to return to open session. We've had a motion and a second. Greg?
Should I call the roll and ask people to please be quiet out there? Maybe?
Yeah, call the roll.
So we can have this meeting. Calling the roll. Reverend Miller.
Here.
Mr. Irvine. Here. Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Mr. Silva.
Here.
Reverend Patterson. Here. Chairman Peterson.
Present.
We have the quorum back with 6 members of the board here.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is the approval of the October board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comment? Hearing none, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of October 10th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Reverend Patterson, a second. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Reverend Patterson. Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
Minutes are approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. We'll now take up executive session, board agenda item number 5. It is my understanding that there will be no executive session. Karen?
That is correct, Chairman.
All right, thank you. The next order of business is the report from the Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
Yes, the Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this afternoon. The committee approved the October minutes and reviewed the finance report. The committee also reviewed the following ordinances. An ordinance amending Ordinance 017-124, approving the fiscal years 2018 to 2022 capital improvement program. An ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2019 and financial plan for calendar years 2020-2021. An ordinance approving the fiscal years 2019-2023 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and execution of grant and cooperative agreements and amendment and related materials. An ordinance authorizing an amendment to a sublease between Sterling Racine LLC and Chip Bob for property located at 120 North Racine Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. An ordinance authorizing a lease of retail concession space located at 15 West 95th Street, Chicago, Illinois. The committee also reviewed 10 purchases and sale award recommendations. The committee approved all 5 ordinances and all 10 contracts, placed all these items on the omnibus, and recommended board approval on the omnibus. That concludes my report, Chairman Peters.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Reverend Patterson. Yes. Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a construction report. Carol.
Carol Morey, Chief Infrastructure Officer. So before we get started this morning, I wanted to introduce to you, Chairman and the board, the newest member of the construction team. I have with me Tanisha Marshall. She's our new Vice President of Construction. She started with us on Monday.
All right.
So she's,
Welcome.
in addition to her experience in the private sector, she's been with IDOT, most recently with CDOT as the Managing Deputy for Operations. So we're really excited to have her join the team.
Good morning. Bill Mooney, Vice President of Power and Way. First project we'll provide an update on, as usual, is our East Lake, Milwaukee, Illinois substation project. Recent activities is focused mostly on transitioning at Milwaukee our transformer rectifier combinations, which is where we take our ComEd feeds and ultimately convert them into the 600 volt power that we distribute to our system, and preparing those for our network, as well as Illinois has spent a lot of time and energy focusing on actually connecting to the new traction power equipment as it's all been installed within the facility and it's being prepared to be cut over. Pictures here show you the installation of the manholes where ultimately the cables will come out to the field to make those connections, and those cables within the substation themselves at Illinois. And this next picture shows you the new ComEd feeds being connected to the substation actually at Milwaukee, where those transformer rectifier combinations take that ComEd service then and provide us our 600 volt. The next project is the Ravenswood Loop signal upgrade project. Remains within budget but tight to schedule. Recent activities have been very exciting on this project as we have commissioned the first of the 2 of the 3 relay houses. We've had Cleveland, which is out towards Sedgwick, and Willow, which is out towards Armitage, commissioned since we last met. And all the most activities since then has been focused on preparation for the cutover for the last relay house, which is at Illinois. Here you can see the local control panel being installed at Huron, which would allow the crossover to be operated by operations personnel in a single track activity. And the next one is switching over the house inverters, which is where we take our traction power feeds to actually provide house power, because it's a very reliable power stream for our signal system as well.
So the next project is our 95th Terminal Improvement Project. The project continues both tight to schedule and budget, with the opening of the North Terminal scheduled for December. Steel erection is complete. More than 90% of the concrete is poured, and we expect the building to be fully enclosed by Thanksgiving. Work on the vertical transportation elements also continues. Wanted to share a few recent pictures. So this is the North Terminal building, and this is looking at it from the South Terminal roof. You can see the building taking shape. This is the north prow of the North Terminal. As you can see, it looks a little bit like a ship. So we can really see the architectural elements here.
When were these taken?
These were taken about a week and a half ago.
Okay. We're not overly optimistic about these.
I actually met with a contractor last
No.
Tuesday. No, I meet with.
I'm looking at this one here. I said, oh my goodness.
I was just by there yesterday. I'm like, oh, this is
You by there yesterday? I'm looking at this. Okay, all right.
So I met with FHP last Tuesday, including their president, Jim Blair, and they're committed to a December opening.
Okay.
And I would agree with Carol's assessment. I've also had a conversation with Passion, and they have reiterated their commitment. And they're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week out there to get this thing done. But we definitely want to have it done by the end of the year and working very hard to make that happen.
I'm looking at frame where, if you're working inside, that's one thing, but anytime you still have external work to do and the weather can impede that, that's why I was just curious. But I'm going to take you and President Carter at your word.
I mean, the good news is that 90% of the concrete is poured, and that's very weather sensitive. The rest of the work is not as weather sensitive, so we're pleased with progress. So the next project is the Quincy Loop Station upgrade. As you know, this project is very tight to schedule. I'm happy to report that the second elevator has been approved as part of the construction inspection, so that's major progress for us. And we're looking for an opening of the station in December. So here you can see one of the stair build-outs on the west side. The new elevator on the east side.
It's very stirring to see an elevator door with Quincy above it.
Isn't that exciting?
Thank you for that.
No, this is the east one, and we already have one on the west side too. So I was there on Thursday, and things are looking good. So the next project is the Garfield Green Gateway project. So we continue on budget and schedule for a January 8th completion of the project. So the new platform canopy is complete, and the east and the west platform topping slabs have been poured. The northbound platform is open, and the southbound platform will open on Saturday. As soon as we finish the concrete and install the tactile. The main station house remains closed through January 8th, and current access to the station is maintained through a temporary entrance, so customers can continue to use the station at all times during construction. So work inside is also proceeding on schedule.
This is going to be just transformative for this location. I can't wait till this one is finished.
So I was there today, and as you know, the new Green Line Arts Center right across the street opened this weekend. So it's really exciting to see us a part of the change in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I grew up there, so that's why I said I can't wait to
So this
see it,
is-
especially the facility that the community is going to lease with U of C. That whole space, I mean, that's just going to be a beautiful little area.
It is. It is. So here's the new canopy. It's I think really attractive and much more attractive than the previous. Lets a lot more light in. And then the last project on our list is the Belmont and Jefferson Park Station improvements. So work continues on time and on budget. We completed the new canopy at Jefferson Park this weekend. We're currently focusing on new lighting, customer communications, and signage. Work also continues on the rail platform at Belmont for new lighting. And we're also working on both the bus turnaround and the new canopy at Belmont and the bus terminal at Jefferson Park. So you can see here the site work at Jefferson Park. This is the north terminal. Bus operations are continuing from the street as we work on the north side. Additional site work here. Here's some of the pre-work for the structural support for the new canopy. And then here's the rail platform at Belmont. So we painted their new lighting and did a new topping slab on the platform. So it's much brighter than it previously was.
So, Chris, your Chief RPM Officer, I'd like to report on several pieces of work related to RPM. So not the big contract yet, but various pieces of advanced work in the substation. We'll talk about it in a second, as well as some advanced contracts that really prepare the site for the larger design build effort to come. So the first of these is the advanced utility relocations that you're familiar with. The board passed a $35 million ordinance some time ago. We've been working with the various utilities, predominantly ComEd, against that. That effort is on time and on budget. No significant issues there. The main focus of that work really is to clear out various utilities that would in the future potentially conflict with our expansion of the track and the bypass in the various areas that we're working. It kind of is two different things. Predominantly, it's the installation of a duct bank to take some of the higher electrical lines that are interfering with the future structure and put them underground. And then it's subsequently to remove some of the communications cable. That's really the spaghetti that you see in every back alley in Chicago, and to put that underground to feed it up poles and then to swag it out to individual homes and businesses. Right now, we've dug most of the duct bank. In some areas up north, it's lagging a little bit from the areas down south. But once that duct bank is complete, that's when we'll start to cut over miscellaneous blocks and areas according to the ComEd power requirements of the area. And generally speaking, we'll be notifying the affected residents and businesses 48 hours to a week in advance of that, and they will see little, if any, service interruption associated with that cutover. Subsequently, the communications companies will come in and will follow that effort and take their work off the poles, again, that spaghetti, and start to run it into the streets. So we are in the process of doing miscellaneous high pieces of work on the poles, relocating some transformers, and then again, digging that duct bank. If we could actually go advance to the pictures there, you can kind of see on the right-hand side, that's a duct bank up in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization section on the right. Actually, both those pictures are up in the LBMM section of the project. One you can see on the left, we're doing, the utilities are doing transformer work on new poles. And then on the right, this is the relocation of some of those higher lines on one side down into the ground so they won't interfere with our future structure. Then the other advanced piece, if we could just scroll back a second here, is the demolition. So we have purchased a number of properties. We purchased all but 2 properties, and those 2 properties are in progress. But for the properties we've purchased, we're in the process of demolishing them. We've had 2 packages. One of those was completed prior to the start of the Cub season for obvious reasons. That's substantially complete, and the next one is starting this month and will be complete by the end of the year. That's a slightly smaller package. So following sort of a risk mitigation strategy that Dorval would be very familiar with from his FTA experience, we're looking for the things that could cause potential delays to our design build contractor, property acquisition, utilities, and going right after those and making sure they're taken care of in a way that mitigates our risk going forward of any delay from a much larger and more complex contract to come.
Chris, who's responsible for working through the city underground and permitting process?
Well, we have worked with the city to make them aware that this is one project, and that if they can, to give us priority in considering our various pieces of work to keep the continuity as best we can with those utilities. That said, the utilities themselves and their subcontractors submit for the actual permits. Okay. But kind of under the watchful eye of OUC management and with our support to try to make sure that they stay together as much as possible and that various permits aren't languishing. But that is a difficult process, Chairman, and difficult for a reason, right? OUC is making sure that nothing's getting undermined. We are working with them on our own project as well. We'll be doing over 500 caissons, close to 600, largest number probably of any project that's ever been done in the city. So making sure those caissons, which get drilled down, 60 to 80 feet, making sure that that process is efficient for us and subsequent efforts will be really important to the success of our bigger project too. But strictly speaking, the utilities and their subs are pulling those permits themselves. If we could go to the Broadway substation. So Broadway continues, you've seen some photographs of the earlier infrastructure projects. Those are a little bit further ahead than Broadway. At Broadway, we're still doing some of the interior work at that substation. That's a key substation for this corridor and for the RPM improvements. We are looking to build for service in the future, and so having the right power is critical to that. So that's what the Broadway substation project does. So right now we're in the process of testing that equipment. We're doing miscellaneous work on the right-of-way. There was some work this past weekend to put cabling under the various tracks and to put various duct banks in our own right-of-way. Not duct banks like you've seen in the alley, but duct banks up on the embankment that support this project. So that work is on time and on budget. You can turn to some of the photographs. This is a little bit unusual. You saw in Bill's in the infrastructure projects, you saw them kind of doing some underground work. Well, here in this particular case, we actually have to go over to get some of our cabling to our infrastructure. So this is a bridge that will contain several junction boxes, but also some cable runs that will subsequently make it from our substation, which is on the left of the photograph on the left, and then obviously our infrastructure, our right-of-way, is on the right. So this is a little unusual for configuration, but work continues here. If we can go to the next picture. We see the inside of the substation, so the same kind of scope to make sure that exterior envelope is in good condition, that nothing's leaking on our very expensive utility-grade equipment, and that all the floors and everything else is in good shape to support adequate traction power well into the future. So project's really just getting started, but good progress and on time and on budget for the Broadway substation.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that update. I was looking forward to seeing progress. That's helpful.
Small stuff, but important.
No, it's, if you don't put the infrastructure in, you can't do the other stuff. So, all right. Let me just, any questions for the construction team before? Okay. Thank you, Kara. Thank you. Greg, is there any new business to come before the board? Before I take a motion to adjourn, I would just like, on behalf of the board, to wish everyone and their family a happy Thanksgiving. I look forward to seeing you back here next month at the next board meeting. But with no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving.